I'm going to do something different. I don't want to do what James Rolfe has done, because what James Rolfe did is amazing. All I wanted to do is come in and talk about games I enjoyed. I don't live in the past, but I appreciate the past. I'm nostalgic about the past, but I think we're living in the best time for video games it's ever been. I find these days I'm just kind of getting a little tired of the same old.
It's like the Family Guy-ization of content. Hey, maybe if we reference something, that'll be enough to make things interesting. Lately, I've actually been enjoying playing bad games more than mediocre games. Are there any like guilty pleasure or bad games that you have fun with?
Sometimes I enjoy the experience of just talking about a game. There's so many games that come out that you got to think about that I don't talk about. Sometimes some of the other games get missed, and I can only cover so much.
Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. It is TCU's Days. We are here live recording on Discord every single Tuesday. If you want to join us, just join the Discord. If you want to chat, just become a patron. Go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown. I am Kevin Lieber, and not with me as always is Matthew Tabor, who is off this week. He is probably, archiving some old meat that he bought on sale in a freezer somewhere, or perhaps some tobacco cards based on famous dogs from the 1930s. You never know. You never know with Matthew Tabor. He could be doing any number of things, but he's not here. Who is here, though, is a longtime friend of mine, an old school YouTuber, somebody that I'm really excited to have back for the second time on TCU, the HappyConsoleGamer himself, Johnny Millenium. John, thanks for coming back on TCU.
Thanks for having me. And it's so funny. I woke up this morning and I'm like, oh my God, I got my daughter's cold. I'm like, great. So bear with me if I have a little cough here and there. I'm going to try to work through it. But, it's kind of weird, Kevin. The last time I was on, I was just getting over being really sick. And here I am back in your podcast. I'm sick again. Isn't that great? Perfect.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I should stop inviting you on or something, and then you'll just be healthy all the time. I'm not really sure what the correlation is, but I'm ready for some gamer tub talk. If anybody wants to watch an old video of John and I being weird on YouTube, then just look up HappyConsoleGamer Gamer Tub Talk, where, man, that was so long ago.
I was about to say, how long ago is that now?
Well, look, the point of reference I have is that you weren't married yet. And Kim is in that video. I don't know if you remember that she's in that video with you before you guys even got married.
Yeah, she's wearing like contact lenses as well. It's like surreal to watch the video. It's like pretty wild stuff. And I mean, yeah, I think you did JonTron in the tub, and then you did me or something. It was like crazy back then. Yeah,
I got Peanut Butter Gamer, I think, JonTron, you. It was like a who's who of that era of doing kind of video game stuff on YouTube. And that was actually what I really wanted to start off asking you about, because, we had James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And,
right.
It was amazing to talk to him because it was the first time I've ever spoken with him, but he had such a big, like, seismic influence on so many creators back then that I think is kind of forgotten and lost now. But I had mentioned in that podcast that, his whole angry video gamer guy shtick ended up influencing you in a way to go the complete opposite direction as the HappyConsoleGamer, because almost everybody was just doing the angry thing, right?
It was really easy to do that, I think. I shouldn't say easy to do, but it was cool to do. Like, it was cool to be the angry guy bashing games. And I kind of like that too, because there's a lot of games that I absolutely hated. I was like, I want to do that as well. But I'm like, I'm going to do something different. I don't want to do what James Rolfe has done, because what James Rolfe did is amazing. And it changed everything in the video spectrum on YouTube. And what I was going to do was something at the time brand new. Can you believe it? All I wanted to do was come in and talk about games I enjoyed. And that wasn't a big staple at the time. That wasn't a big thing. It was about being angry. So being happy and enjoying video games, that was kind of anti-cool. But everybody was about to change that tune real quick because everybody was about to come onto YouTube as well and kind of do the same sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it goes to show just kind of, I don't know how many people could have done what you did at that time. Like, certainly there are other people that could have, but if anybody hasn't watched your most recent video of your game room tour, the Game Room 1990 tour,
Right.
I please beg of you, pause this podcast, go to the Happy Console Gamer YouTube channel, check out his game room tour from his game room in 1990, because you will see that this guy was doing this way more hardcore and way more passionately way before any of this YouTube stuff came along. So it almost ended up being, in a weird way, like YouTube was just finally a reason for you, or a mechanism for you to talk to people outside of your bedroom, basically, about these games and anime too, but mostly the games.
It's interesting. I really enjoyed doing that video, and it was kind of like I was looking at my life. I'm like, wait a second, this is like 30 plus years ago now. It's really strange, and that was just my life. And I mean, playing video games and watching anime was considered uncool, but I always considered it very cool. I didn't care what anybody said, and so I'm really happy, to be honest with you, that I have video from back then. That I have all that to show that yes, I was into this stuff now. I didn't just come onto YouTube and go, okay, I'm into video games now because like video games are cool on YouTube. It's like, no, I always thought video games and anime were cool, and so I really enjoyed doing that video to put across that. Yeah, I mean, this has just been my life. It's not been anything else but that. I mean, I have a real passion for anime and for video games, and it's never gone away, Kevin. I'm 48 years old. I got into this stuff when I realistically, like with the NES, I was probably like 12 or 13, and the passion and the excitement still continues to this day. In fact, I just got a review code. I won't say for what game. I was like a little kid. Like, freaking out, going, oh my God, I get to talk about this game. I'm like, this is so exciting. I'm like, this is a game that really means something to me. It's like kind of a re-release. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to dive into this and give some light on it, because back in the day when I did original play it, nobody cared. I was just in my room by myself. My friends, Rob and Satan, would come over and they're like, oh, you're just playing this game. This is awesome. We sit down, we have a couple of beers, and that was it. There was no YouTube. There was no way to put across the passion. And so you're right. It's almost like YouTube was created at the right time to give me, me and many others, yourself included, a way to verbalize our passions to the world. And I never thought that there would be, I didn't know how it would be received. I thought it was going to be embarrassing that people would want to laugh me off the internet, going, oh God, this guy just likes video games. What's this? What a nerd, what a goof, and all that. And all the stuff you wanted to avoid in high school. I always try to fight against that, but it's kind of cool that YouTube has made it cool to like all this stuff. And we live in a very different time, Kevin, than we did back then. You got to agree on that.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And that's something I've said actually on this podcast before, because I don't think that people who grew up kind of in the era of video games being mainstream, comic book characters being mainstream, all of that was just the nerdiest thing. I remember telling a story where when I pre-ordered Final Fantasy VII from KB Toys,
Nice.
You got a free t-shirt. They gave you a free Final Fantasy VII t-shirt, which I still have somewhere buried. The amount of times I've moved over the years, I've always kept that shirt because I thought it was cool, but I wouldn't wear it to school. I wouldn't wear the Final Fantasy VII shirt that I thought was really cool to school because of what you were talking about. I'm like, I'm going to get bullied. I'm 100% going to get bullied for this nerd RPG video game t-shirt. So I was on my body in school.
Yeah. No, I was out of high school at that point. So I didn't have to worry about the stigma of high school. Like, you had to understand, back when I was in high school, like in the 90s, early 90s, I was taping anime music from off beta onto my onto cassette tapes and going to school. And I was so scared that somebody was going to say, "Are you listening to Japanese music? Oh my God, you're a nerd!" Like, because it was so different. It was so different in the late 80s, early 90s to do that. And by the way, Kevin, sorry to interrupt you when I did there, but yeah, I had 2 of those shirts. I went to 2 different places, put $10 down, and I got 2 shirts. And let me say, both of them are unwearable because they have so many holes in it. I wore them so many times, but I was out of high school at that point, so I could kind of get away with it. I was just in the basement all the time, so nobody had to see.
Well, speaking of T-shirts, I wanted to ask you a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a week ago or so, you tweeted this amazing photo of you and your late father from the mid 90s, and you were wearing a Dragon Ball Z shirt. And my first thought is, oh my God, look at young Johnny with his ridiculous hair. My second thought is, where does one get a Dragon Ball Z shirt in like 1995? Because now you can't you can't walk out the door with being smacked in the face with stuff like that. It's just everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's at Walmart. In 1995, impossible. I'm like, where did he get this?
Oh, there's a good answer to it, and you're right. Me and my friend Rob, all we wanted was video game shirts and anime shirts, and they were very hard to find. There was no merchandise. Isn't that so stupid? There was no merchandise back then like there is now. So that picture was taken in Hawaii. I was 19 years old, and we were walking down the street, and some guy if you notice, it's not an official Dragon Ball design. It is. I think this person was copying the original guy, Akira Toriyama, really well. But he was tracing over, and then he did a print, and he was selling them on the side of the street in Hawaii. And we bought it. I think it was $20 or something like that back then. I think my parents bought it for me, obviously. So that's where I got that shirt, and I still have that shirt somewhere. It's in some container somewhere. I have a huge collection, which is kind of really weird to say, of video game shirts. I have like, Kim gets mad at me because the closet, it's like 60% video game shirts, 40% Kim's clothes. And she gets so mad. She's like, are you going to move some of these or something? I'm like, I need all of these for the show. I can't, so when I move a shirt out, she's so happy she can move another outfit in or whatever it is. So yeah, video game shirts are fun for me now.
Sure. That's kind of a hard thing to collect, shirts, because where do you put them? I mean, I think I have seen some people who collect like heavy metal shirts, and they'll build almost like a display that you would see in a store with kind of like those cubbies so they could kind of like stack them. But I don't know, shirts seem like a hard thing to collect.
It feels like half our community has either switched jobs or upgraded their jobs in the last year or so, and the other half are looking to do it too. Everybody talks about the people getting the jobs, nobody ever talks about who's giving them. Right now is the greatest availability and redistribution of talent that anybody has ever seen. If you're hiring, take advantage of that with LinkedIn Jobs. There are over 770 million people on LinkedIn. That's literally 10% of the entire planet. You can even add a purple hiring frame to your own profile to show that you are on the lookout for talent. Set a few screening questions, narrow it down to the most qualified candidates, and pull the trigger. Everybody's happy. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to, and faster. Every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. They're looking for you. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/create. That's linkedin.com/create to post your job listing for free. Terms and conditions apply. Look, the hardest thing to do is to find great talent and keep it. Keeping it, that's up to you, but it's never been easier to grab onto it. Don't blow that opportunity. LinkedIn.com/create.
I wanted to circle back a second because I didn't want to let this pass without asking you. You mentioned having a friend named Satan. Why is his name Satan?
I know. I met him. Let me tell you a little story about how you meet people in the 90s in video games and anime. I turned 21. I had a birthday party, and so there's all my friends are over and stuff like that. And somebody else invited this girl, and she's like, "Oh, you've got to meet my boyfriend." And I said, "Oh, what's his name?" She says, "It's Satan." I'm like, "I want to meet this guy. He sounds great." So what happened is he worked at a gas station, and some girls came up to buy something, some younger girls, and I think they wanted cigarettes or something, and they were too young. And so one of the guys working there is like, "Oh, you can't buy cigarettes underage." And they're like, "Why not? We're age." They're trying to fool them. Like, "Well, we got Satan works here." And they're like, "What, Satan?" "Yeah, he's Satan." And that's where the nickname came from. And then everybody called him Satan. It was hey, I even have a friend from back then called the Gooch. Remember that? Different Strokes? The Gooch, there's a bully in there. I had a friend called the Gooch. Everybody, you know what it was? Everybody had a nickname in the 90s and all that. So she says to me, hey, you should meet my boyfriend. He's really into anime and video games. And I'm telling you, Kevin, you know what it was like to find somebody that was into anime and video games? Nowadays, you go in a forum or you go on Twitter or you can meet people anywhere online. It's easy. Back then, there was no online. So you had to hear from a friend to a friend to a friend that this person kind of liked anime or they liked video games. And then you're like, oh, and get this. Back then, what we did, I said, give me his number. I called him up the next day. I'm like, hey, do you want to hang out? I didn't even know the guy. And I picked him up and we went to Richmond, this place by us. And man, I mean, they have so much anime stuff for sale there. And we went for the day and we had a really great time and we hit it off and we were friends after that. And, played all the biggest RPGs and sat and drew together and stuff. I mean, isn't that funny how life works?
Yeah, no, that is. You are right, though. It was like if you ever found somebody that for whatever reason also had like Ninja Scroll on VHS, you were like, who are you? And just so you know, we are now best friends.
Yeah.
Never letting you go.
It was I don't want to say it was a more interesting time. It was a quieter time. I mean, I've said it so many times. I say it to Kim a lot. It's not because I'm older and I'm looking back nostalgically, but because everything is so online now. I really appreciate like hanging out with my friends in the basement, smoking cigarettes, playing video games, and none of us had a phone. And we gave everybody, face-to-face talk time all the time. Mm-hmm. It was like nobody was looking at a phone. We were all looking at the screen or playing a game or communicating with each other. And I'm nostalgic about the quietness of the 90s. Is there anything that you miss, Kevin, from the 90s? Obviously it's like wrestling from the 90s we miss and stuff like that. But is there anything back then that you're like, oh man, I'd love to go back to the 90s for this reason?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I don't think about the past a lot. No, not really. I've mentioned so many times on this podcast how terrible I am at remembering things.
Oh wow.
And it's simply because I don't think about them. Like I don't really think about old things all that much. It's very kind of weird, I guess, but I have a hard time remembering stuff because I just kind of don't think about it. But
would you say that you're a person that just like lives in the here and now and you have a bit of nostalgia, but you don't think about the past?
Pretty much, yeah. I'm really focused on. I would say I'm really focused on today and tomorrow all the time. Like I'm always like, what can I get done today? What do I need to do tomorrow? And that's kind of where my brain is almost always.
Well, what's interesting for me is that I have a daughter. It's always about what I need to do next. I'm in a full routine these days, and it's very rare to get time outside of that. But the funny thing that I still do is I still think about the past. And let me tell you something. I'm like you. I don't live in the past. That's one thing I want everybody on the show and anybody listening to know is I don't live in the past, but I appreciate the past. And I think it's very important to kind of to look back on the past to see where we're at now. And I kind of do that quite a lot. And, to say, where were video games then? Where are video games now? How did I feel then? How do I feel now? And I got to say this, I'm nostalgic about the past, but I think we're living in the best time for video games obviously, it's almost so obvious it's ever been. It's amazing, right?
Yeah. So they're definitely, now that I think about it for a second, there are like a couple of things that I do miss a little bit. One is hand-drawn anime.
Right.
I miss hand-drawn anime that's, obviously never coming back for a lot of reasons, financial mostly. But I have been really enjoying the kind of like the remastered discotheque Blu-rays that a friend of mine has been putting out. Justin Savakis is in charge of a lot of those, but I've been really enjoying going back and watching those like 80s anime.
What have you been watching? Because I've been getting them all too, so I'm curious.
Oh man. Recently, what did I watch? Cyber City, Oeda.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
I always call it Odio, so I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Because there's nobody in the 90s to correct me, ever.
Yeah. You just read it and make it up.
That's it, yeah.
Crusher Joe. Crusher Joe is really cool. I really enjoyed that. What was the one that I watched recently about the the little girl who has like kind of superpowers, and she has like a little girlfriend, and they end up fighting
Project Echo?
aliens. Yeah, Project Echo. I watched that one most recently,
Oh,
and that was
dude,
cool too.
I honestly, there was one afternoon. It sounds funny. I've been sick the last couple of months, a bunch, but there was one afternoon I got the Blu-ray and I'm watching it, and I was having, it was really foggy outside, and I was having this little gin, and I'm not saying that I don't drink a lot, but I was having a little moment because I felt really crappy, and I was watching it, and I got a tear, man, watching that. It took me back to 1988, watching that in a back room at a comic book convention on a wooden TV on VHS, and that was the first time I saw Project Echo, and that was a really big deal movie at the time. Were you there for that point, or are you just jumping into Project Echo now? I'm curious.
No, I'd never seen it before. I'd never even heard of it until this. I saw buzz around the Blu-ray. You posted about it. Justin posted about it. And I was like, I got to check this out. And one of the things that stood out to me was the music, man. Like, I know that 80s-ish music, synthwave stuff. I mean, we use synthwave stuff with this podcast, is really big now, but there really is a major difference, sonically, to the music that was actually made in the 80s with those machines. You can hear the difference, and it's really fascinating and awesome to me, because I was a kid when that music was really popular.
Yeah.
Hearing that stuff again is such a trip.
Well, what's interesting about the music about Project Echo as well, I got the vinyl record in the other room. I love the soundtrack so much. I've listened to it for the last 30 years plus. What I was going to say about that is that the singing is obviously English speaking girls who did the singing, which was really different in an anime back then. But here's the thing, Kevin, and on the Blu-ray, you got to watch it. There's a documentary on the making of the music, and that is the best documentary for Project Echo you're going to get on the disc. It's amazing. It was actually American guys who did the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And so they met with the Japanese, and they're like, and the Japanese people are like, okay, we want music that sounds like this, and they just went off and wrote it, and they created. I still think one of the best soundtracks in an anime nearly ever, because just for as you're saying, the techno-esque kind of music from back then, the synthesizing music was so cool and so much bigger than the anime was. What did you think about the animation itself? Like,
well, it was great. It was great. And there were so many funny moments in that movie when she's she gets stuck on the jet fighter as it's going up, and the guy looks up. I mean, I laughed out loud at that part. But yeah, the animation is great. The animation is great in so many of them. The earlier 80s ones, I kind of have not trouble with, but the animation was like noticeably cruder. It still has charm to it, but it's cruder. By the late 80s, holy crap, there were so many. I mean, I didn't realize we'd get so far into anime, but by the late 80s, they really hit their stride with so much of this stuff, like the Crusher Joe OVA, which came out. Like the Crusher Joe movie was early 80s. The Crusher Joe OVA was later 80s, and holy cow, the drawings in that OVA are astounding. They're just eye candy. You just sit there and almost don't even care what's happening because it's so pretty to look at.
Yeah, I think people will say, a lot of people will be jumping into anime now and they have their favorites, but I really think it was the boom. It was a certain time period in Japan, and I don't want to say, like, actually one of my friends, the King of Smut 95, calls it, I think, Jrpg, guns, girls, and gore, and that's what it was. A lot of it was about back then. So you get there's a lot more gore. You don't get a lot of gore anymore. And people are like, oh, why would you want that? Well, I enjoyed it. I mean, Japanese creators back then were very influenced by, American movies. So you have The Thing, The Terminator. These kind of themes are like all in that anime during that booming time. And I really appreciate it. And you're right, Kevin, like looking at some of the early 1980 stuff is difficult, even for me being an old school guy. But you can say in the late 80s into the 90s, they were just on a different level. And I think I still feel this way, that back then there's a storytelling that was going on in Japan. They were really a lot more into science fiction and really interesting stories. Like they even say that The Matrix was taken from Megzone 2-3. The whole idea that, you're living in a world that's not really your own. And I just feel that some of the best story ideas came out of the 80s. But that is for American movies as well, though, don't you think, at that time?
Yeah, definitely. I actually read. Before I forget, speaking of gore, Genocyber was another one that I watched
I remember
recently. That is like notoriously very violent, but awesome and incredible animation. I read something recently that I found really compelling. I don't know if it's true, but it piqued my interest, and I found it and I found it a compelling argument. It had to do with what you're talking about. It had to do with storytelling.
Hmm.
And essentially, the argument that was being made was that I don't really know how to draw a line here, and I don't recall exactly what era they were drawing a line, but let's just say it was late 80s, early 90s. Essentially, they were suggesting that creators at that time were drawing from influences with a wide range of like mediums, not just like movies, but books, literature.
Right.
Basically, they were drawing from a whole kind of like array of influences to craft their stories. I think Akira in particular, like the influence of Akira are like very, very clear. I can't cite them off the top of my head, but I think there was a documentary on the Blu-ray for Akira that talked about the influences of the old robot cartoons, the nuclear stuff,
Definitely.
blah 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 blah. Check that out if you're interested in that. But the point is, there's a suggestion that today's creators, today's writers, storytellers don't really have as cultured almost a background in storytelling, and they're sort of just rehashing stuff that they've already seen before. And that's why we're not getting stories that are that interesting right now.
It's a really hard time to be a fan of science fiction and all those kinds of things, because I'm watching stuff, and I'm not going to go into the shows like, say like a show like, I'm going to say Picard. I'm watching that, and it's like, okay, we're doing stuff that was done in The Next Generation and a few other episodes. We're doing the same thing again. Like, they've just run out of ideas. They're going back and saying, oh, well, that worked back then. We'll just regurgitate it again. And once in a while, that's fine, but it's all the time now. All they're doing is remaking everything, kind of making it like the past, but changing it, and it's just not as cool, And I find myself going back and watching a lot of stuff in the 90s a little bit more now. A lot of, movies and TV shows these days don't have my attention the way things did back in the past. And maybe that's a sign that I'm just getting older.
Yeah.
But I also think that, yes, I think we're creatively bankrupt now. I think people are growing up, and they're growing up with shows and just saying, oh, I'll copy that show. I'll copy this show and this show and this show. And I don't think that creates for a great thing. They're not going to books that were written before all this boom happened. Like, there's so much anime, like Lensman. There's this book Lensman that was made into an anime in Japan. That's really, really cool. And even Starship Troopers, nobody knows this. Starship Troopers was made into an anime first from the book. And
I didn't know that.
You can go onto YouTube. It's I believe it's 3 OVAs. I may be wrong. I watched it a couple of years ago, and I knew about it back in the 90s. But it was nice to see subtitles on it, because I didn't see it with subtitles by then. But it's kind of cool, and it's closer to the book. So they got the powered suits in that anime and stuff like that, where when you got Starship Troopers the movie, there's no powered suits. Maybe they can do the CGI for that back in the 90s. Starship Troopers, what a great movie. But but for sure, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if everything's going to get back on track, if we're going to get original ideas. Like, think about the Terminator series. We got Terminator 1, which is amazing. Terminator 2, unbelievable. Terminator 3 is like, okay, we're just going to do a female Terminator now. Kind of the same thing. And then after that, we're just doing the same thing over and over and over, running into the ground where you want to see something different. You want, like, even for me, the Alien franchise, I want to see something brand new from the. I don't want to keep, it's another xenomorph on a ship. We've already done that, and it's already been cool. I want to go like to the alien homeworld and take them out. I want new concepts. And I find these days I'm just kind of getting a little tired of the same old and repeating the past type of thing. So sorry, there's my rant. I'm out on that one.
No, you're right. I mean, I feel the same way largely. And I do think that I will absolutely chalk some of it up to just getting older and, saying, oh, the stories were better when I was a kid. Everybody does that. Anyone who's listening to this and they're, 15 right now, you'll do that. Just wait. But I do agree that it seems like stories. Real quick, I wanted to say, this isn't just conjecture on our part about people rehashing stories. I know a writer in LA who flat out told me that he just will watch old Star Trek episodes, like original Star Trek, Captain Kirk, and rip them off and just change this and change that and adapt it to whatever the show he's working on is. But the framework of the plot is essentially the same thing. So that literally does happen. That's not us just making that up. What I did want to say though is I do think that there's a weird thing about kind of piggybacking off what you're talking about, where stories do not get developed. And I felt that way about Stranger Things. So we did a whole episode with Sean Malone, who's actually coming back onto TCU in a few weeks, and really excited to talk to him again. But the first time we had Sean on, it was like a little bit of an open air therapy session where I was trying to almost talk myself into why I hated what Stranger Things turned into. And eventually I realized it's very simple. It's that my expectations for where they would go building that world were not fulfilled at all. So the types of things I was looking for them, to kind of explore when it comes to the Upside Down and all of that stuff, what they ended up doing with it was not in any way what I hoped for. It didn't seem at all as interesting. Instead, it turned into kind of like an anthology series where like each season just pays homage to like other 80s,
I know,
like horror films. And I was like, okay, that's not the show that I thought this was. And so I stopped watching it. I'm like, well, this is not a show that I'm interested in. I was interested in the world that you created in season one. And then you just kind of decided not to really look into it after that.
It's milking its own nostalgia. That's all it's doing. It's like eating itself, right? It's not presenting anything new. Like one of the shows with the biggest blue balls at the end was Lost for me. I don't know if you ever watched Lost.
I gave up on that. Look, dude, I checked out so quick when very early on, I was like, they don't know where they're going with this. There's no plan. And this is a lot of nonsense. I'm out. In like season one, I felt that way.
I didn't
watch the rest of it.
And I was almost out too, but J.J. Abrams, before he did all Star Trek and Star Wars and all that, he came out and said, don't worry, guys. I got a plan in mind. He said this, don't worry. And then we know what the ending was. I was so mad. I bought all the box sets. I bought the box sets for my mom back then. She loved watching the show. And when it got to the end and it was like, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but I'm telling you, don't go and watch Lost if you haven't seen it. Do not waste your time. Do not waste your time. So, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is a weird thing too, to even the shows that you get invested in, like for me with Stranger Things, and all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, anyway, so now this season is like Invaders of the Body Snatchers homage. And it's like, all right, I'm out. This is not interesting to me. Like I want to see the characters explored. I want to see the world explored. I want like new conflicts and new danger. And instead it's kind of like, it's like the Family Guy-ization of content where it's like, hey, maybe if we reference something, that'll be enough to make things interesting.
Yeah,
not for me. I don't know.
You verbalized it in a way that I watched it and I was like, okay, yeah. I kind of was losing interest in the last season. I was like, well, that's interesting. I like some of the references and all that. But I didn't feel the same way I did. The first season was like, wow, like that was a big deal season. And then after that, I was like, okay. And I've never analyzed it. It's one of those things that was popcorn filler for me, and I'm out type of thing. So
put down your can of Hyper Hydro Monster and your Crimson Berry White Claw. It's time to rethink the beverages in your life. We drink a tremendous amount of tea, working on videos, recording the podcast, but we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. They've got a gunpowder green tea called Space Cowboy. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know why Kevin likes it. And I used to chew gunpowder green tea leaves when I played baseball in the 90s. I love the stuff. Dragonwell Z, Samurai Chai Plu, black teas, herbals. The Dragon's Treasure describes itself as a haven for anime and tea lovers for a reason. They've even got a tea called Uwu. It's got apple bits and cocoa nibs. It's crazy. I bought the 60 tea sampler pack as soon as I could. I wanted to try everything. It's that good. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using the code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description. Look, find me another place that sells Russian caravan tea with a name like, "And then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked." You can't. Thedragonstreasure.com, 10% off when you enter the code CREATE at checkout. The link's in the description below. Get brewing, Space Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But, you know, we're coming off, Kevin. It's funny. We're coming off as being very negative right now. And that's always funny to say because we're so positive about so many things. And this is a good bridgeway into you because you've been telling me for a while, oh, I've been kind of out of video games, you've been saying, and, you know, this game was supposed to, you know, do this for me and it didn't do it. And that all changed for you recently, didn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. So I don't have like a whole lot of people to vent my video game frustrations to. So, you know,
I'm like a therapist. I'm his therapist. I hear it all the time.
You have to bear the brunt of that. But yeah, man, I had a stretch last year where every new game that came out that I was excited for, I didn't enjoy. I just didn't have fun with it. I was like, this is kind of boring.
Can we do a list? Can we go through a couple of them? This is not a shaming list because we all feel very differently about video games, and it's okay not to be turned on by a game. I mean, why? The game doesn't owe you anything. I mean, you don't owe the game anything. So
yeah, I'm trying to think of all of them. The few off the top, the one I complained to you about the most was Metroid Dread.
Right.
That was a game that I was so hyped for. I love Metroid, and I just wasn't happy with the product that they ended up, you know, putting out. Ys 9 was another one. Yeah, like I don't know, like just that city, just walking around, and then you have to like do those like tower defense things to clear up like red goo. I don't know. I was just like, I liked Ys 8 so much more. Like Ys 8 felt like an adventure where you could just wander around this island and unlock stuff. Ys 9, I was like, this doesn't feel like an adventure. It's like I'm in this prison and I can't get out and I don't really care. So
I think it's got a very negative beginning to that game. You're right. But once you get past that and you open up the city and you have everybody's different abilities, it feels really good. The game comes together at that point, and then you leave the city. And then you're like, oh, God, yeah. Because at first I was like, oh, this prison. Like, can we never start a game in a prison? I think you can, but don't spend too much time there. Just get out and let's get going. You know what I mean? I think that's what turned a lot of people off for sure. So I don't think you're alone on that one.
Just seemed drab, but I mean, it is possible that I could go back and really enjoy it. Because one game that I went back to and really enjoyed was Death Stranding.
Right, you did.
Yeah, that was a game that I played for a bit, and I was like, this is pretty cool, you know. And then I gave up on it. And then when the PS5 upgrade came out, I went back to it. And then I just spent like 80 hours just loving that game. It was such a weird vibe. I felt like it was like Animal Crossing for sci-fi people. That's how I felt Death Stranding was.
It's funny that you didn't like the game at first because, Kevin, I would say that game is created for you.
Really? Why?
Well, I think because you have a very analytical mind. And that game is about it's about puzzle solving and about figuring out your ways across certain things and how can I use this and this. And I think you once you got it, you're like, this is my game. Because I can see that for me, I love the world building in that game and I like the music and I like a lot of things in it, but I don't think I'll ever finish the game because sometimes I get frustrated by it. Where you had that kind of brain, you're like, no, I understand how this all works, and I'm going to do it, and you got it. And so I understand that. Certain games are like that for certain people, you know?
Yeah, I think at first I was overwhelmed by how kind of big it was. So, you know, I played it for like, you know, whatever, 10 or 15 hours, and then I was like, I don't know if I'm going to spend another 70 hours doing this. So that's when I put it down. And then when I went back to it, you're right, it really did click, and I was like, all right, what kind of boots do I need to get through this terrain?
And you have that brain. You're the kind of guy that if you reviewed this game, it would be an analytical review of an analytical game. It just makes total sense. I really see that. It's funny.
And then there were games that I really loved parts of and really didn't like other parts of, like Resident Evil 8.
Oh, wow, you didn't like it?
I loved the first half, and the second half I felt like I was just kind of going through the motions. Like the whole mansion was so cool, and then that really creepy like dollhouse like scenario that was totally inspired by PT.
Oh,
I thought
definitely.
was so cool. And then the second half of the game seemed more like, all right, now we're going to ramp up the action and here's a bunch of guns and you got to shoot things. And I was like, I really liked the slow kind of horror half a lot better than the, grab the grenade launcher part.
From what I heard is that the seventh game was too scary for a lot of people. This is what Capcom said, that it was too gross.
What?
And so, yeah, you can go online and find this. I read this a while back. I think it was even in one of my reviews I did on the game, is that so you can feel that 7 is really kind of like gross and kind of dingy and evil and creepy, where 8 it has the setting, but once you're walking around, it doesn't feel quite that way. You're like, oh, geez, Lady D's around the corner. That's kind of scary, but you're not grossed out. I think that's what it was. They would try to lower the grossing out factor. And then you're right. If that's such a Capcom thing to get to the end of a game, here's all the guns. That kind of realistically really be that's been in all of the Resident Evil games to a certain extent, but it did feel like they went, okay, here you go. And it's like a different game. I'm with you on that, but I still loved it. I really enjoyed it a lot. Yeah.
The graphics and the atmosphere were really cool, but it wasn't. So then I had my little intervention with you, and I was all bummed out.
Yeah.
And then I took a flyer on Tales of Arise, and one night, I was just needing to unwind. Oh, like Ni no Kuni 2 was another game I tried, and I was like, this game blows. I don't like it. It's not fun at all. Like, it's beautiful to look at, but like the gameplay is stupid.
Yeah, I kind of was a little that way, but Kim loved it. She finished that game. To be honest, we liked it overall when we finished the game. We liked it overall. Yeah.
I don't know. It had that. What do you call that when you have like your little armies and they just smash into each other?
The problem with the game is it has so many different variable gameplay things going on. So you have combat, then you have the little skirmishes and things, right? And the exploration. Yeah, I mean it's very unusual, and I would have liked if they'd concentrated just on some aspects more, but it wasn't a failure of a game. I mean, there's failures of games out there. Wasn't it for me for a JRPG, but yeah, so you did that, and then what game were you getting into?
Tales of Arise.
That's right.
I bought that on a flyer because I was like a couple of people who I like said this game was good. I have played Tales games in the past, and I thought they're pretty good. But holy crap, I was blown away by Tales of Arise. Like that game, the combat in that game
Unreal.
is so freaking fun that it actually did the impossible, and it made random encounters fun for like 100 hours. Like I never got bored just having random encounters in that game because it's so fast, it's so fluid, there's so many things to do. It's so cool.
What it is what we when we go from one machine to the next, so we go from PlayStation 2 to 3 and 4 and all that. This game feels like a next generation experience with the combat engine. It feels like I'm playing a next generation RPG. Like you can see that in the world that it builds, running around, how good the graphics are, how smooth it is, how imaginative it is, though. It's not just that there's good graphics, it's really imaginative, and there's a lot going on in your world. You're running around, you see a merchant there, there's a monster over here by the water. It's got this kind of magical feeling. And then you're right, you get into combat and you're like, oh my God, I feel very at home here. And I'll say this much, and the storyline is a bit whack, and it gets a little bit more whack as you go on, and all that. I put it this way. Me and Kim finished that game for review, and I can't remember the storyline worth anything for me. I can't remember anything about it. No, I'm being dead serious. No hate to the game. I remember liking it at the time, but going, this is a little far-fetched at the end. It's a little ridiculous, and all that. I think what it was is I was there for the combat. I was there for the music and for running around and exploring the world. That's the things I enjoy the most. And the storyline, I know I enjoyed, but it just kind of got me from the beginning to the end. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just the gameplay loop of that game clicked with me in a way where I was like, "Oh, I do still like video games. This is freaking really fun." And it's one of those games where, you look forward to sitting down and playing it again. Yeah, the story was like, if you paid me, I wouldn't do a good job of
See,
explaining it. It was one of
I
those
know it's
things.
one of
It
those.
it got crazier and crazier. It was like the alien people, they were
Oh yeah, that's
pressing
right.
the other
That's right.
people, but then it turned out there was like this spirit energy that was controlling them, and I don't know. Yeah, it
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it spiraled out of control. But the gameplay loop, if anyone is interested in JRPGs or has been disinterested lately in JRPGs, the two that I would recommend the most are Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is amazing. The story in that and the characters in that are
It's
so
amazing.
good,
Yeah.
so good, and definitely Tales of Arise. But I wanted to make a point to you, and just I'd love to hear what you think about this because, well, when I was thinking about, all right, we have Johnny coming on the show. I'm gonna kind of think about, what to talk to him about as far as like the video game stuff. Here's what I realized, a little bit of a realization about myself, and I don't know what this means, but it's probably pretty weird. But I'm just gonna share it with you. Lately, I've actually been enjoying playing bad games more than mediocre games. So I'm in this weird spot now where the games that I'm enjoying the most. So, for instance, Elden Ring, I absolutely loved. I finished that game. I played it for 113 hours or whatever. It was
Wow.
amazing. I love the FromSoft games. So that game is absolutely a 10 out of 10. I loved that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've been playing through games like the Sopranos game on PS2.
Oh my
And
lord.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Enchanted Arms, which is,
A
like a
PS1 game?
No, no, no. Enchanted Arms was a PS3, Xbox 360 FromSoft
Oh, I can
JRPG.
see the game. Yeah, it's come from the era. Yeah, yeah.
It was like one of the earliest JRPGs of that console generation.
Right.
And then the game I started recently since I finished. So I went from Elden Ring to Saw on the PS3, which is like a horrible. Well, it's horrible. The controls are horrible. The battle mechanics are just atrocious. But the atmosphere and stuff are cool. It's very gory, but it's not a great game.
Hmm.
So I don't know what that means, but like I would rather play like a kind of an objectively bad game that has a weird charm to it than kind of like a game that I think is new and shiny, but I feel like is kind of middle of the road and not
Well,
doing really
I think you're
anything.
coming off a game like Elden Ring, which is such an incredible marvel of modern, I was going to say filmmaking, of modern video game creation. And then, so after that, you're not going to jump into another Elden Ring. You're like, I've done something really big. I'll dabble with some, silly games here, some silly games there. You're allowed to do that now. I think that's what finishing Elden Ring allows you to do. Is just have a bit of meaningless fun after that before the next soul crushing game comes in for you, right?
Is it a pendulum swing? I don't know. Are there any like kind of guilty pleasure or bad games that most people consider bad
Oh,
games that you have fun with?
oh, sure, but
Or recently at all?
oh, geez, I think well, usually I'm playing all the latest stuff. I go back and play some older stuff once in a while, but games from my childhood would arguably be all terrible to new people. They would all be like terrible. Like playing a game like Golvelius, which is a Zelda ripoff on the Master System, is a game that I find so charming and I have so much history with. But boy, it's not a great game in a lot of ways, and it's very hard. And people would just get frustrated, put it down, and never want to try it again. But a lot of my games from my childhood are those games because Kevin, like me and you grew up with the NES and the Super Nintendo and all that, where there's a lot of old, I shouldn't say older kids, but a lot of kids nowadays that are looking back going, "Oh my God, these games are horrendous. Why would you have played them?" We're living in that time. We are like the Atari now. That's like the Atari time. Like I remember when I got the NES, I was like, "Ooh, the Atari, that sucks." I was trying to be an elitist back then, and I think that's happening now. It's really nice. I have a friend who owns a video game store, and he says that young kids are coming in with their parents, and these kids are like looking for NES games. They're looking for Super Nintendo games. They're looking for that era, they love it. I don't know if it's their parents' influence or not, but it's nice that younger people are still getting to enjoy those older games. But I think a lot of them would offend most people nowadays. Unfortunately, not all of them, not all the classics. I'm not saying Super Metroid is going to offend anybody. It's not going to.
I was going to say, I still think Super Metroid is the best Metroid.
It definitely has some of the best music. I still feel the music has not been topped from that game. And it's not nostalgia. When we got to Prime has some really nice music in it. That was the big thing for Metroid Dread. I even said in my review with Rob, as much as we liked the game, I know you didn't, the music was absolutely forgettable. There's no song that I was like, oh my God, this is really standing out to me. It's just, it goes in the background. It's not offensive, but nothing stands out. I mean, and all that. It's funny, even like a game like Tales of Arise, it's a great game, but I don't go, man, I need to get the soundtrack for that. But then again, Shin Megami Tensei 5, I'm like, I ordered the CD soundtrack the other day from PlayAsia. I'm like, well, I got to have that. So it did still, the music is still pretty good in these games, depending on the game and all that. But anyways,
I was surprised that Metroid Dread just didn't remix like Super Metroid and original Metroid tracks. I don't know.
Then again, it would have just been regurgitating the past. We need to do new things. We need to do new things and all that.
Even if you strike out, it is good to take risks.
Oh yeah.
We want to help you make something and mean something. And we say that phrase all the time because when you're making something and you know it means something, even if it's just to you, that's when you feel pretty good about what you're creating. The support for the Create Unknown in recent weeks has been incredible. Animators, artists, musicians, YouTubers, aspiring filmmakers, comedians, it is crazy how talented everybody in this community is. Consider joining the Create Unknown Patreon. Every dollar that comes through goes straight into the podcast and its community. That means more highlights videos. It means a big Minecraft project that's on the way. And eventually we'd like to manufacture custom piss bottles so you never have to leave your battle station. And being a patron unlocks participation in all of our live recordings. You've seen the roster of guests we've had. Having access to their minds is a unique opportunity. You can go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown or click the link that's in the description. Every little bit helps and your support means absolutely everything to us. Patreon.com/thecreateunknown, links in the description. We appreciate you, Space Cowboys.
There are a couple of like YouTube specific things that I really wanted to ask you. One is that I noticed that you're doing more first thoughts videos rather than full reviews. Now, is that like a time thing on your end that doing like a full review is just too much time to spend on one game?
Well, the problem is you may have seen that lately, but we had so many big games come out at the same time. So I play Horizon Forbidden West, and it's like I was only about 10 hours-ish in, and I'm like, well, I can just do a first thoughts on this because I'm still going to play this game, and that game is amazing. I love that game. And then all of a sudden, boom, this Elden Ring comes out. I'm like, oh my God, I have no time just to kind of go in and do one thing the way I want. It's funny, I just got a review code today for a game that I absolutely will review. It will be a full review. And all of that, and I'm going to go in depth on all of that. It's time when you have too many open world games coming out. Who can do that? Who can do that? You can do it at IGN if you have all of these different people reviewing different games, but here it's just me or Kim. That's it. That's the only people who are playing the games over here, and we legitimately play the games, right? So I want to go in. For me, Kevin, sometimes I enjoy the experience of just talking about a game and giving a first thoughts and saying, guys, Elden Ring, my God, this game is like, even in the first 10 hours, this is a game of the year. This is without question. This is nothing to even debate and all of that. And I just want to talk about it because I'm enthused. And hey, put it this way, there's so many games that come out that you got to think about that I don't talk about, that I don't. I have to specifically make a list of games that I want to talk about. I'm like, Elden Ring, I think that'll be interesting to talk about. Horizon Forbidden West, big game as well. So I want to talk about those games. So sometimes some of the other games get missed, and I can only cover so much and all that. So that's why a few more first thoughts, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's completely fair to do. I mean, if because I have such a variety of content on the channel. I hate saying content, videos on the channel. talking about video games. So it's not just one first thought after another. That would be over. I'd be like, oh, come on, man, do something. That at that point. So yeah, so that's the way.
Yeah.
That's why it is. Just some big games.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I thought to myself, like, maybe this is kind of like an angle that Johnny feels like, he can really provide a service or, to people who just want that kind of guttural reaction to a thing rather than some deep analysis where it's like, well, here's the frame rate on Xbox S compared. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, there are channels that'll do that. Like, you can go to Digital Foundry, they'll do that for you. There, you can go to this channel and he'll, tell you all about the voice acting or whatever. But for you, it's always really just been about passion. So it seemed to me like, maybe the first thoughts thing almost is really like a unique Happy Console Gamer thing.
I don't know who else was doing it at the time, but I remember doing a first thoughts video, and that was kind of a weird thing to do. It's like a first thoughts on the game. Usually it was a review. And all of that. So
you would think people would think, wow, you're pretty lazy, man. Why don't you just review the thing? Because ostensibly it would seem like first thoughts. Why don't you just do the full review?
Well,
but
it
works so well.
There's times. There was a time when I got Ys 8. I got 2 weeks early. Boy, oh boy, could I sit and take my time and do that game. There's no other game out. And I was able to go in and do my review on that. Like, no problem. Where a lot of these times, like, this is a whole debate for another thing, where some of these companies, they give like IGN and them games weeks ahead of everybody else. And then you get a game a couple of days ahead and you're like, what can I do? I've not argued behind the scenes, but I've said, hey, I really want to do a full review. I need some time. I can't just so that's why I opted for some first thoughts. So at least I can get in there and talk about it and get out and be fine with it, and then play the game on my own time, type of thing. But it's sometimes you want to be out. Like I like to be out when the embargo comes out. I think, I did years of reviews far after the embargoes have come out. I've done reviews of games years later. So I kind of like sometimes getting a review out, especially on games that I like, during the time that it's kind of hot. That is true. I'll definitely say that. There's no problem with that, because I was there anyways wanting to play it day one. So, I want to talk about it day one. So, yeah, so that's kind of how it kind of goes with all of that. I mean, I wish there was more time in my life because I already dedicate so much time to the show. It's insanity. It's completely insanity.
Yeah, I believe it. Well,
love it though. Love it. I'm not complaining.
Well, no, I know, and it's obvious. And anybody who's followed your channel for the last how many years?
14 years.
14 years. That's obvious. But one thing that I really like to do on this podcast, and one of my goals for the Create Unknown, is really to be able to kind of contextualize creators like yourself, because I don't think that it's sort of one of those things where it's like, well, if I don't do it, it doesn't seem like anybody else is, so I guess I'll do it,
right?
And with you, it's so obvious that this is you. Like whenever I think like, oh yeah, like I'm really into this and I'm really into that, I'm like, nobody's into this or that more than my friend John. Like, he is the OG with all of this stuff. And, there are plenty of YouTubers who got into even the retro side of gaming stuff just to come up with a clickbait title, and they make their AdSense, and, they're doing their thing and they're making a living, and, God bless them for that. Like that's fine. That's one way to have a YouTube channel. Then there's another way to have a YouTube channel, and that's what you do. That's the Happy Console Gamer channel, which is like, you almost were afraid to even do this at all. It wasn't even a thing that you were super excited about, but you were the same way, where you're like, if I don't make a review of these games called Ys or Ys, or no one even knows how to pronounce these games, it doesn't seem like anybody else is going to. So I will, that's such an organic thing.
Yeah. No, I would have liked to have seen, if I didn't do it, what would have happened? Who else would have jumped in to do it? Would it have gone the way it had gone? Would we have gotten more Ys games? Would we have gotten more Dragon Quest? I can't say that I made a change, but I think some things did change. I remember talking about Guardian Heroes and nobody even knew what Guardian Heroes was. And all of a sudden they're like, we're bringing Guardian Heroes to the 360, the Xbox 360. I was like, I can't take credit for any of that, but it's nice when things like that happen because it happens for everybody. Everybody gets to play Guardian Heroes. That's all I cared about. That's all I care. I don't have an ego to go, oh, I'm a cool guy because I talked about this game. And it's more like, yeah, I love this game and I'm glad other people get to play it. And let me tell you something, Kevin. I would have a much, much bigger show than I do if I sold out. How I mean, and there's nothing wrong with doing this. I never tell people to subscribe. I don't go, hey, you're checking out the HappyConsoleGamer show. Make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. I tell people to leave a comment on something that's interesting and important to them. I never say to like or subscribe. And maybe I should have. Maybe I should do that. But I can't. I feel it gets in the way of what I'm about to do. Where I sit down, I'm like, hey, we're talking about this game, and I get into it. I don't want to waste people's time. People's time is valuable. And I think if anybody wants to subscribe, they would. I have analytics on my channel that says my channel should be 500,000 subscribers, right? It should have been. But I mean, I've also, people come in, they saw an anime review, then the next episode I'll be talking about an old game. But, oh, I'm out of here. So I think I've tried to remain the channel more video game centric these days than anime centric because people are always like, oh, I came here for video game. People start getting upset nowadays. But yeah, I could have made the show a much bigger show. I'm very conscious of it. I could still do it now. I choose not to. I actually choose not to because I feel it creates some integrity from the show. And let me say, I said to a lot of my friends, nice guys finish last. And especially on YouTube, you don't want to sell out. You're going to have a smaller show. I opted to have a smaller show. And I'm very happy with the audience that I have. I'm happy with everybody who's there. You know, everybody wants to be there. Nobody's been told, hey, please subscribe to me. And I'm not knocking anybody who says that. It's a very valid thing to do on YouTube. It's something personally for me, I chose not to do, you know, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, just speaking for myself here, you have remained one of the only channels that I still watch all these years later. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. There are plenty of channels that are still around. They still upload. And I was interested at one point, but eventually I was like, yeah, I'm kind of over the format or the gimmick or like whatever the thing that they do is. But with you, I think what is unique and what has given you longevity is that it's not a gimmick. It's not a format. No. You know, they say in all the YouTube playbooks in the world that authenticity is king. And to a certain extent, it is. To other certain extents, it's really not. With you, it absolutely rings true. It does feel like you have created this vibe where you're just hanging out with your friend. You know,
that's what it's supposed to be.
I don't mean that to be like a parasocial weird thing. It's like a very kind of chill thing where it's like, all right, let's hang out with Johnny and like hear what he has to say about this game.
It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be that it's a friendly environment. It's saying, hey, we all like video games. Come and hang out. Come hang out with my friend Rob. And we're going to tell old stories. You guys have old stories. And everybody has old stories. And so people can relate through our stories about their own stories. That's the secret. That's the secret of it. And when I bring Kim on, it's about having my family of friends there. I've had my friend Andrew on from my past. It was just a great friend of mine. Rob on. I've even had Satan on the show. I have Kim on the show, and I have I interview people and all that. And it's about making people feel intimate with us and all of that. Like, we don't share all of our lives, about everything, but we try to make it inviting, and we want to create a place where people come in and because the internet's kind of can be a nasty place at times, sometimes, and I want to create a place where people can come in and just feel how cool, comforted and away from politics and away from that. You'll never get that from me on Twitter or on the show. I don't talk about religion or anything. I don't have an interest in it. It's not my passion. My passion is talking about video games, and I want people to escape away from all of that, because I know a lot of people just want to escape all of that, and that's what I try to create on the show, a place where I go, oh, good, friends. We're talking about video games. We're having a good time. We're talking about old games. We're talking about new games, and that's what it's all about. So I feel Kevin, I feel after 14 years, I don't want to sound stereotypical here, but I feel really happy, and I feel really, really fulfilled with what I built up. And it feels really good. And it's as much as a show for everybody. It's a show for me. It's a show for my daughter, in the future to watch, so she can see what like all my memories and things like that. I wish I don't even have video of my dad. Right, I'd have nothing. I got that picture with him with the shirt in Hawaii, wearing the Dragon Ball shirt, where my daughter will be able to see who I was, what I was all about, and what excited me about things to do with arts and video games and culture and all of that. And it realistically for me now is something that she can look on in the future. And as long as she doesn't see that episode and skipping school and playing video games, we'll all be okay at that point, type of thing. So,
well, I know that your time is precious, but we have a few questions from our patrons. And before I get to that, I just wanted to say real quick, one of the funniest things to me has been watching Kim's journey from like first getting into JRPGs to becoming like the JRPG maniac. Like she will play all of these games for like hundreds of hours. And it's not like the kind of thing where it's like, oh yeah, she kind of dabbles in it now. And it went from like 0 to 1,000 over the course of the time that you've had this show on YouTube.
I never say this to her. She's in the other room working right now, but it's really funny. Super proud. Like I am in awe too, Kevin. I'm like, when she was doing Shin Megami Tensei 5 and rocking it, not just kind of rocking it, I was like, this girl is a freaking RPG machine, man. I'm like, holy shit! And she finished that game in like I swear to God, it was a couple of weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Done. We did our review. And she was near the end, just annihilated the game. And then Tales of Arise, done. You know what I mean? Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, done. Dragon Quest 1 to 3, done. She's still working on 3. She's taking her time with 3. I don't know what's going on with that. She's been doing 3 for the last month or so, but we've both been a little busy lately. So with our daughter, but yeah, and she's really come into her own. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's really funny to me. There was even at one point where I said something to you about how you really got to finish Xenoblade Chronicles X, and you were like, yeah, maybe I'll watch Kim do it.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Well, there's a part of me that there is a big part. I love playing video games more than anybody, but there's also that guy that used to go to my friend's Andrew's place down the street, and I watch him play a lot of games, and they were his games. And sometimes I get that there's a real comfort for me sitting on the couch, you know what I mean? And just watching Kim playing some games. And I'm just like, and we sit there and we just talk, and I take the control at times, so we do things, and I take certain bosses on, and we switch back and forth a lot. But I like that interactive experience playing a game with your significant other or your friends. You know what I mean? It's something really fun about that.
Yeah. All right, I'm just gonna hit these questions real quick. We double up with a couple of questions, so sorry, patrons, but I'm gonna pick out one from each of you. The first one is I'm gonna pick out from Jeff. He's asking what your favorite JRPG is. Now I know the answer is Phantasy Star.
Yeah, it's Phantasy Star.
Yeah. Do you have like a second? Like if you don't know about Johnny's love of Phantasy Star.
Yeah,
you've done whole videos on it. Is there a number 2 though? I've never heard you talk about like a solid number 2.
Honestly, I got a big video coming out. It's humongous. I've been working on it for months. Where I will dive really in depth into that is the first I talked about this, but where I lay it all on the line for RPGs pretty much. So I think that'll get answered in there. I definitely say that Phantasy Star 4 is in there. There's a lot though, Kevin. I mean, there's so many great RPGs. I mean, on every machine I could pick one. I could say the PS1. I could say Final Fantasy 7. I could say Suikoden. I mean, the list goes on. Like Final Fantasy 9. I mean, all of these are great games. I'd have to rank them, and that would be where the insanity is. So yeah.
You could just choose Xenogears and make me happy.
And Xenogears would be a bloody good answer. Would be a great answer until you get to the second disc. Disc.
Yeah, then it's just like a novelization. The Xenogears novelization is this too.
I know.
Charles Kahn asks, he's curious what kind of tabletop gaming that you've been up to. He knows that you're a 4E D&D guy. His favorite videos of yours are your D&D videos.
Well, thank you. You're one of few people who really like those. Like, D&D videos started off really good on the channel and they died off. And I think that's because people are getting D&D everywhere else. So I thought, well, I'm not the defuncto D&D channel, but what are we doing? It's interesting. I got this big game of D&D that I'm doing with Kim, which is really going really well. That's an entire episode into itself. I honestly, I came out of a video game store just before the pandemic hit, and I ran into a guy who watched the show, and he was really into Warhammer. Really nice guy. And I'm like, dude, I said, yeah, I've been painting the Blood Bowl miniatures. He's like, oh, I play Blood Bowl all the time. I said, do you want to get together and play Blood Bowl? Because I don't know anybody who does. He said, yeah. So we've been planning to play it for the last 2 years. So that's something I'd like to get back into a little bit more and stuff like that. And we also have Hero Quest, the original. And Kim is always saying on a night, she's like, let's play Hero Quest. And I'm always like, I'm exhausted, because it's always such a busy day. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing, but Hero Quest is one we want to get back to as well.
Okay. Well, Isaac wants to know, this was just announced today, the day of this recording, that PlayStation Plus has this whole new 3-tiered subscription service. Did you have any initial thoughts on what they're doing there?
Well, the thing is I because I've been sick today, I saw that was posted. I haven't seen all the details of the service, but I will say this much. I'll just say this off the fly, that PlayStation needs this. Xbox Game Pass. I am, obviously I'm not paid by any of these companies to say anything, but I think me and Rob are always talking about how much we like Game Pass and where people are like physical copies. But Game Pass has sold us because there's so many games. Because the amount of, put it this way, my nephew was over the other day visiting with my mom and sister, and I was trying to find a game for us to play. Oh, Streets of Rage 4, downloaded that. Me and him were playing it instantly. And it was just easy because it was there. Hit download. I was on Game Pass. We were happened to be on that and all that. But PlayStation, absolutely, Sony needs a really robust Game Pass themselves. And so I'm going to really look into that. Hopefully it's something that will build over the years and get a bit better. It's hard to keep up with Microsoft. They have so much money. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get you out on this one. It's a good one. I like this question. It's from NRM, and NRM asks, "What console do you believe needs some more love?"
Holy cow! Let's see.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Is that like a console of all time? Does that mean it needs more game love or just love in general towards it?
I took it as the latter, more love in general.
The TurboGrafx needs more love because, put it this way, it was like a child that was born and the parents just put it out on somebody's front step. It really it feels like that to me, and it really does. And for all of us that were there that embraced the TurboGrafx, it was a beautiful time. It was an alternative to Sega. It was an alternative to Nintendo, but it was still very Japanese. And that's what was so cool about it. A lot of the games were from Japan and had anime influences there, and that was great. And Ys 1 and 2 and the CD-ROM, and it just never got the love it deserved. It died way too soon. I'm not getting choked up. I actually have a cold here. It's so funny, but I really believe that that's a console that I could love to and talk about to the ends of days because I think it's just so underappreciated. Super Nintendo doesn't need any love. It's got everybody loves that machine, and all the rest of these machines do as well. But TurboGrafx always a place in my heart.
I'm kicking myself for not getting that TurboGrafx Mini because it's out of print now, and it's like $1 billion on eBay to buy.
You cannot blame me for not telling everybody to buy it.
Man, and I blame myself.
I'm not gonna rub it in, Kevin, but I was looking at it. It's hooked up to my TV all the time in the living room. It's eternally plugged in, and I'm always looking at it and go, I'm really happy about that.
You don't have like a backup of a backup of a backup you can send me?
I told the story a little while ago is that the cable guy came over here to fix some cables in the walls, and he's like, "Oh, you have to collect old video games and stuff." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, I remember playing the TurboGrafx. I need to buy a TurboGrafx for like blazing lasers." And I picked up the TurboGrafx Mini. I'm like, "Dude, look at this!" And he's like, "Oh, what is this?" And I'm like, "Going to Amazon. This is like a year ago plus." And he's like, "Oh, wow, I'll get this." And so he went off to get one. I sold the TurboGrafx Mini in my house. Well, no, I didn't give him mine, but he went on Amazon and got his own. But that's the reality. I'm not just going online telling people to buy shit. I say it to their faces.
No, I know. You're always just exuding your passion for gaming, and that's what's so great about you and your channel. And the last 14 years on YouTube, and you said it yourself recently that you're looking forward to the next 14 years on YouTube as well. And you have no plans of slowing down.
Not anytime soon. If I didn't do it, it's not about money for me. It's not about internet clout or recognition. It honestly is something psychologically that I enjoy doing. I really love talking about video. It makes me feel really good. Like, that's the bottom line. That's all it is. There's no secrets to it. That's it. So,
all right. So real quick before I do let you go, what are you most looking forward to for the rest of the year? Obviously, Breath of the Wild 2 is not coming out this year. They just announced that also today. That's delayed till spring 23. So what's on your plate?
I was looking forward to Advance Wars, but that's been taken off. Obviously, Chrono Cross, the remaster, we'll call it, Radical Dreamers Edition. Looking forward to that. And I'd have to look at my list because I always I go by the month, so I'm only 2 months ahead right now. But there's quite a few other games coming out. It's a lot lighter of a year, Kevin. It's a lot lighter. This is what I call like post-COVID. I was saying 2 years ago, when COVID first hit, I said, yeah, the games have already been made. I said, but I'm worried about the next 2 years. Next 2 years is hits. I can't believe they did Elden Ring though in that time. Amazing. So there's a lot to come though.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for dropping by. It was great. It was great for me. I hope it was great for you just to get some gaming talk out here in the world. I know you don't get enough of that on your YouTube channel or your personal life.
Oh, it's nice to talk to people.
Stop by.
It's nice to talk to people about it. And Kevin, because we're old friends, I've known Kevin for 22 years, I'd say at this point. And so it's always nice to come in and have a chat. That's for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, everybody, please, if you have any interest in gaming or just watching a man be very enthusiastic about the things he loves, go check out Johnny's channel. It's called the Happy Console Gamer, and become a lifelong fan because you have lots of years ahead of you and a long back catalog of videos to go through as well. All right, man, I'll get you out of here. Thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, we'll see you next Tuesday, and be sure to go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown to support this show. Until then, we'll see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and we've been shocked by all the new support this year. The World's Ending and I'm Late for Work, Gib Tom, Sid Poke, Demetrius, Atrocious Guff. You guys really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. And thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Jen Mefasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Risebread, Sean Malone, Ryan, Kamikaze, Maria, Marco Sheep, Tom Videogre, Jeltsies, and Dan the Latch. And a tremendous shout out to our elite Baby Gang commanders, Linus and Trevstead, Boromir, Bot Dogs, Chinchilla, Isaac, Conrad, James, Andrew, Jeff Davis, Patrick Pister, Baseweight, Monahim, Dojangles, and Zero. You really are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Discord Savior Latterman, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. And thanks to Baseweight for the use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme, and to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.